Think about what it would be like to live like a true Stoic, where problems no longer take you off the axis, where criticisms and frustrations do not drain your energy, where your mind remains firm even when the world collapses out there. It seems unreachable, but it is possible. Stoics were not made of stone. They just chose to live with clarity and discipline when everyone around them was lost in impulsive reactions. Today you will figure out how to do the same. And if you apply these lessons, you will stop getting lost in excuses, anxiety, and self-sabotage. Not because the world will get easier, but because you will become stronger. Before I start, I want to invite you to do something powerful. Go to the comments and write, "Today I decide to live in direction, and I stop being distracted." That phrase will be your anchor. It will be the beginning of a journey that can transform not only what you do, but who you really are. Now take a deep breath. What comes next is not fleeting motivation. It's soul training. It's time to turn the key. Let's get started. Number 1, master your mind before the world does it for you. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the following scenario. You are in the center of a busy square, surrounded by voices, screams, horns, people running, notifications vibrating in your pocket. The whole world seems to require your action from you. But in the midst of this chaos, you are standing there, steady, with your feet well planted on the ground and your eyes turned inward. That is the image of the inner domain. Not a superpower, but a choice. To master the mind is not to silence the thoughts. It is not to be dragged by them. It is to be conscious enough to realize when it is being invaded by automatic impulses, that hasty judgment, that useless comparison, that emotion that takes you without asking permission. Those who do not observe the mind end up being commanded by it. You can change home, city, body, career. You can surround yourself with books, gurus, and courses. But if you do not learn to govern what happens inside you, the world will always find a way to destabilize you. The undisciplined mind becomes a dark room where any noise turns into a storm. Stoicism does not require you to become immune to suffering. It invites you to be greater than your suffering. Not because you ignore it, but because you learn to give name, place, and measure to everything you feel. Instead of escaping from emotions, the Stoic views them as messengers. He listens, understands, welcomes, but does not surrender the rudder in their hands. The mind is like a river in full season. It can destroy or nourish depending on how you take care of the shores. When you learn to watch what you think, you begin to perceive patterns. Fear does not arise from nothing. It is rehearsed in small mental repetitions. Anxiety does not fall from the sky. It grows where there is internal disorganization. Dismay does not come to you by chance. It feeds on unfulfilled promises made to itself. You need to become a guardian of what allows you to grow within yourself, because every cultivated thought turns into a belief. And every belief shapes your posture before life. A simple "I am not able," repeated for long enough, turns into destiny. So start by observing what goes through your mind when you wake up. What are the first words you say to yourself? How do you treat yourself behind the scenes of consciousness? Would you be your own enemy, fighting invisible battles that no one sees? To master the mind is also to pause, is to create spaces between the stimulus and the reaction. Does anyone provoke you? Do you breathe? Does anything get out of control? Do you observe? Do you want to give up? Do you accept but follow? Because you know that it is not what you feel that defines you, but what you choose to do with what you feel. The mind is not something that is controlled once and for all. It is a workout, a constant return to the center, a smooth but firm redirect every time you get lost. And it will happen, you will get lost. But the more you train, the faster you find yourself. The freedom that so many seek out, in relationships, in money, in travel, begins with a silent decision. Do not let your mind sabotage you, poison you, take you away from you. Start with the humility of looking inside and saying, I am willing to rule me. Because in the end, that's it. Either you dominate your mind, or you'll be dominated by it. Number 2, stop reacting. Start responding wisely. Imagine standing in front of someone who teases you with sharp words, trying to drag you into an emotional fight. But instead of blowing up, you just breathe. Look into the person's eyes and choose the silence, not because you agree, but because you refuse to be dominated. That is the power that Stoicism teaches you. The difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is immediate. It's visceral. It's letting the world dictate your behavior. A criticism turns to attack. A mistake becomes shame. A delay becomes catastrophe. When you react, it's not in control. It's on the autopilot, guided by patterns that may not even be yours. Reacting is being a puppet of circumstances. Answering, on the other hand, is an act of consciousness. It is a space between what affects you and what you choose to do with it. It is a sacred pause where you decide, not just act. It is the moment when you remember that you need not be a slave to any emotion, neither of anger, nor of haste, nor of fear. The Stoics knew this. Epictetus, who was born a slave and was one of the greatest masters of philosophy, said that the problem is not what happens to us, but how we interpret and react to it. Because it is possible to cross offenses without absorbing them. It is possible to see injustice and maintain dignity. It is possible to disagree calmly. And yes, it is possible to say no without shouting. Answering wisely requires training. It is not natural in a world that teaches us to explode before reflecting. But that is exactly why this virtue is rare and so transformative. Start by breathing. It seems simple, but it is revolutionary. When something hits you, before any word, breathe. Bring your attention to the body. Note the heat, the tension, the impulse. And then, decide. This pause returns to you the power that the world tries to steal every second. To answer is not to ignore what you feel, but to choose what to do with what you feel. It is to turn anger into clarity, fear into prudence, pain into compassion. It is to look at the other, even if aggressive, and to see there a wounded, confused human being, perhaps asking for help in the worst way possible. The wisdom lies in not being contaminated. It is easy to return rudeness with rudeness, but it only feeds the cycle. The real power is in interrupting it. When you respond wisely, you do not avoid conflict. You reframe it. You show the other one and yourself that there is another way to be in the world. A way where calm is strength, gentleness is firmness, and presence is more powerful than any argument. That's not passivity. It's emotional maturity, and it has a price. The effort to observe yourself before pointing the finger. The commitment to your peace, even when the world seems to shout that you must fight back. You are not here to be a reactive anymore. You are here to be a beacon, to show, in practice, that it is possible to answer with consciousness in a world addicted to explosions, that it is possible to maintain composure without losing intensity, that it is possible to disagree without destroying. Answering wisely is an act of resistance against chaos, and at the same time, a gesture of self-love. You don't have to win every fight or have the last word, just choose the one that keeps you at peace. Number 3, accept now what you can never control. There is a silent pain that goes through the lives of almost all of us, to want the world to follow exactly the script we have created in our heads. We want people to act as we hope, that the past has been different, that the future obeys our plans. And when none of this happens, as it almost never happens, we feel betrayed, anxious, angry, exhausted. This internal struggle is subtle but constant. We try to control the emotional climate of others, the circumstances that surround us, even the feelings that we cannot avoid. But the more we try to force the course of life, the more it proves indomitable. What is left? frustration, and with it the tiredness of living against the flow. To accept is not to be passive. It is to be lucid. It is to look at a situation and say, "This is not under my control, and so I let go." Not as if you give up, but as if you recognize your limits wisely. You are not meant to hold the world with your hands, only to walk firmly on the ground that belongs to you. How many times have you been stuck in thoughts about what you should have done, or what someone else should have said? How many times have you been paralyzed trying to predict all the variables before you act? This need for control is not force, it is fear in disguise. And fear creates a prison where the only key is acceptance. Stoic philosophy invites us to a fundamental distinction: what is in my hands and what is not? This question, repeated as a mantra, can free you from unnecessary suffering. Your actions, your character, your words, all of this is under your control. But the behavior of others, external events, chance, death itself, all of this is beyond your reach. And when you insist on controlling what you can't, you start wasting your vital energy on battles that can't be won. It's like trying to push the wind or hold time with your hands. The Stoic, on the contrary, acts where he has power and surrenders the rest with dignity. He doesn't resign himself. He gets free. To accept what cannot be controlled is to stop bleeding from within by wars that are not yours. It is to say no to pride that always wants to be right. It is to silence the ego that insists on shaping reality to its whims. It is to embrace life as it is, imperfect, changeable, unpredictable, and yet walk with clarity and firmness. You can take care of your health, but you can't control all the diseases. You can devote yourself to love, but you can't make sure it's eternal. You can act honestly, but you can't stop the other one from lying. And it all hurts, but denying that pain is what hurts the most. Accepting it, no matter how hard it may seem, is what heals. This lesson is difficult because it interferes with the deepest human desire, that of security. But true security does not come from controlling everything. It comes from trusting itself, whatever happens. You don't need to control the world to live in peace. You just need to take control of what you think, what you feel, what you choose to do, and let the rest take your course. Accepting what you cannot control is the first act of courage of those who are ready to stop suffering for nothing and start living with truth. Number 4, use each difficulty as your training camp. There are those who see pain as punishment, others as injustice, but the Stoic sees in adversity a training camp, a place where the character is cut, where the soul gains musculature. Because for those who are awake, no obstacle is in vain. Every difficulty brings within itself a hidden, and sometimes brutal, opportunity of inner strengthening. How many times have you asked yourself, "Why is this happening to me?" When in fact, the most powerful question would be, "What is this trying to teach me?" This change in perspective is what turns suffering into purpose. Not because pain stops hurting, but because it takes a direction. You do not choose the challenges that come to you, but you can choose how to face them. And it is in this choice that true freedom lives. Stoicism does not teach you to avoid pain. It teaches you to use it. Every loss, every disappointment, every failure contains lessons that could not be learned otherwise. The question is, are you willing to listen to them? Adversity reveals what is fragile. It shows where you still depend on the opinion of others, where your pride still speaks louder than reason, where your fear still directs your decisions. It is a mirror without filters, and so it is so valuable, because it shows you clearly what you need to strengthen. Have you ever noticed how the wisest, calmest, deepest people almost always carry invisible scars? It's because they went through pain and didn't run away from it. They learned to stand when everything seemed to collapse, and it didn't harden them. It just deepened them. Adversity is what separates those who live in a reactive way from those who live with intent. The first one despairs, revolts, sinks. The second one observes, learns, transforms. Not because it is cold, but because he has learned that life does not happen as we want it, but as we need it. You can resist what challenges you, or you can ask yourself, how can I grow up with this? This question does not erase pain, but reorganizes it. It gives meaning to chaos, and in time, it turns you into someone who no longer fears falls so much, because you have learned to rise with more wisdom. To train with adversity is to use the bad day as strengthening. It is to accept the delay, the rejection, the error, as material for the construction of its maturity. It is to stop asking for facilities and begin to desire depth, because those who only walk on flat ground never develop resistance. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What blocks the path becomes the way." This is the core of Stoicism, making the stone a step. From the limit, an impulse. From suffering, a portal. Are you living a difficult time? Then know, this moment is your training camp. Breathe, observe, reorganize your forces, and walk with the certainty that none of this is in vain. Yes, but it is also shaping. It is cutting something that no easy day could offer. The solidity of those who have learned to go through the fire without losing themselves. Number 5. Get rid of the excess and find out what it's like to be libre. There is an invisible weight that most people carry, not in the body, but in the soul. It is the weight of excess, of objects, of desires, of expectations, of appearances. It is like going through a long journey with a backpack full of things that we do not use, but that we insist on taking, as if possession gave us security. But the more we fill this baggage, the harder the way becomes. Stoicism invites us to do the opposite, to empty, to let go, to simplify, because freedom is not in having everything, it is in need of little. There is no more subtle prison than depending on what you cannot control. And the more you accumulate, the more vulnerable you become. Have you ever felt suffocated by a routine that revolves around keeping things, status, achievements that don't even touch you from the inside? Have you ever bought something to relieve a void, and soon afterwards realized that the void was still there, intact? This is because we were taught to seek out what is only inside. And in this blind search, we accumulate not only things, but noises, distractions, anxieties. Living with less is an act of courage. In a world that tells you all the time that you will only be someone when you have more followers, more money, more visibility, to choose the essential is a revolutionary gesture. It is to declare that you will not be defined by what you have, but by what you carry in character. But attention, simplicity is not mediocrity. It is sophistication of the soul. It is knowing how to separate what is vital from what is vain. It is to have clarity about what sustains your peace and what only embellishes your insecurity. Seneca wrote that those who are content with what they have are rich, because this wealth does not depend on luck or circumstances. It depends on vision. Those who live with less can walk lighter. You can listen more carefully. You can sleep more quietly. You can love without bargaining. Simplicity gives us back the present. It takes us out of the maze of almost there and puts us in the here is good. It is not conformism. It is consciousness. It is to stop sabotaging with the idea that something is missing all the time. It is to allow yourself to breathe, without the pressure of always running after something that may not even be your real desire. Living with less is opening space. Space in the house, in the agenda, in the mind. It is looking at what you have and asking yourself, does it serve me or just arrest me? It is observing your habits and saying, does it nourish me or consume me? It is making choices based on value, not on appearance. You don't need to become an ascetic or live isolated on a mountain. The call here is for a more intentional life, where each object has a purpose, every relationship, every truth, every goal, every sense. And make no mistake, the freedom that is born of the least is not absence. It is presence. It is the ability to be whole anywhere, even with nothing in your hands. It is to be able to lose everything, and yet to stand up, because what you are does not depend on what you have. The Stoics knew this, so they practiced voluntary deprivation from time to time, slept on the floor, ate little, wore simple clothes, not penance, but to remember that they could live with less, and in doing so they became unmovable. Today, the invitation is the same. Take away what is in excess, what holds you, what has already lost meaning. Retrace the strength that is born in silence, in lightness, in the essential. Because sometimes, to be more, all you need is less. Number 6, train your gratitude until it becomes a habit. Have you ever noticed how the mind by default runs faster than it is lacking than it is in what already exists? How is it easier to complain than to contemplate? More natural to see faults than to recognize blessings? It is as if we were always looking for something and never fully here. Stoicism does not treat gratitude as a romantic ideal or a feeling reserved for easy days. For the Stoic, thanking is a practice, a training of attention, a rational decision to focus on what is present, even when the heart is tempted to lament what is absent. To train gratitude is to tune the look to realize what is already working, the body that breathes, the food on the table, a true conversation, the opportunity to try again. It is not about denying the pain or pretending that everything is fine, but to recognize that, even in pain, there is something for which one can thank. Sometimes, for standing up. Others, just for being alive. You don't have to wait for great moments to feel gratitude. Life's greatest treasures usually hide in small gestures. A hot coffee in the morning silence, the sun that passes through the window, the unexpected message of someone who cares, the bed at the end of a difficult day, the laughter that arises in the midst of tiredness. All this is life. All this is gift. The Stoics understood that gratitude does not depend on ideal circumstances. It is, in fact, what prepares you to go through difficult circumstances with lucidity. Marco Aurelius wrote in his diary, "Even in wars, even in losses," because he knew that the mind needs direction, and that gratitude is a way to direct it to what it sustains. And here is the secret: what you focus on grows. If you focus on scarcity, you will miss it more. If you focus on chaos, you will be more afraid. But if you train attention to what is good, even if small, even discreet, you will feel more peace, more courage, more strength. Daily gratitude is not about ready phrases or postings at the end of the year. It's about presence. It's about, in the middle of a difficult day, stopping and recognizing there's still beauty here. It's about, faced with a problem, remembering, I have tools, I have a choice. It's about changing the automatic complaint for a conscious thought. I've been through worse things. I've won before, and now I can too. This practice is transformative because it changes the quality of your internal state. And when your internal world changes, the external world begins to respond. Not by magic, but because your posture changes. Your energy changes, your look changes, and you begin to realize possibilities where before you only saw obstacles. Seneca said that nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart. And he was right, because the grateful heart is not naive. He is resistant. He sees pain, but also sees learning. He knows that everything passes, but that while he is here, there is always something to be celebrated. Then start today. Train gratitude as one who trains a muscle. When you wake up, name 3 things for which you can be grateful. When you lie down, do the same. And during the day, in the midst of chaos, repeat to yourself, even in here, there is something good. In time, this silent training will shape your spirit, and the world will stop looking so dark. Not because everything has changed, but because you have learned to see light, even in the shadows. Number 7. Act with virtue. Even when no one is looking. There is a silent anxiety that consumes millions of people every day, that everything they do needs to work. If it does not generate applause, validation, quick return, then it seems like it was not worth it. We live slaves of an external thermometer. The quality of our actions has come to be measured by the fruits they produce, and no longer by the intention that moves them. Stoicism breaks with that logic. For a Stoic, acting well is not a strategy to reap something. It is a choice of life, because the results, these are not under our control. They can come or not. They can be fair or not. But virtue, the commitment to honesty, to courage, to justice, to temperance, that is always within our reach. Act with integrity even when no one sees. Act with justice even when the world rewards the opposite. Act with courage even trembling inside. Because in the end, what defines you is not what you get. It is who you decide to be in the process. And you know that. You felt empty after you've achieved something you've longed for. You've realized that fulfilling a goal doesn't necessarily mean inner peace. Because the problem is not to conquer. It's to put all your identity in the fruits, forgetting the tree you are. How many times have you sabotaged yourself by not seeing a quick result? How many times have you abandoned a right path because it seemed too slow? We live addicted to immediate results, and with this we stop building what really matters, a life of coherence. To act with virtue is to live solidly in a liquid world. It is to do what is right, even when the right seems not to bring advantage. It is to understand that its value is not measured by numbers, but by its ability to maintain integrity even under pressure. And that's not easy. You will be tempted every day to exchange principles for results, to manipulate, to lie, to force, to act on the basis of fear or greed. Because culture says, come at any cost. But philosophy says, live with honor, even if you lose. And in the end, whoever you listen to defines who you become. Epictetus taught that true progress begins when you stop caring about the judgment of others and start caring about the judgment of your own conscience. That changes everything because it takes you out of the window and puts you in the mirror. What do you do when no one is looking? With what intent do you help, work, talk, choose? Are you trying to prove something? Be accepted? Conquer? Or are you acting truthfully? To live with virtue is to have the courage to do good without expecting reward. It is to choose the most difficult path because it is the right one, not the fastest, not the easiest. And that, in itself, is already a victory that the world will not always recognize, but that its soul will feel. Virtue is the only thing that no one can take away from you. Not failure, not injustice, not time. It's your root, your shelter, your legacy. If the result comes, find out why. But if it does not come, let you have the serenity to know that you have acted with integrity. Because there is a peace that success does not give, and that virtue alone offers. Number 8, make silence your most powerful answer. There is a kind of silence that is empty, omissive, disconnected. But there is another that is full presence, the one in which you find yourself without haste, without masks, without distractions. It is this silence that the Stoic learns to cultivate, not as an escape, but as a foundation. Because in the present world, where everyone shouts, opinions less and observes more, is an act of inner force. We live surrounded by noises, external and internal. News, notifications, charges, comparisons. The mind seldom rests. It is always too busy to hear what really matters, what is happening inside you. And that is where silence becomes a training camp. To silence is not to silence. It is to tune your ear to listen better to yourself. It is to create space between impulse and response, between stimulus, and choice. In silence, you see yourself more clearly. You notice patterns that repeat themselves. See pains that were just muffled by noise. And, more importantly, find out what is the right action. Not the most immediate, but the most consistent with who you want to be. The Stoic does not use silence only as rest, but as practice. He wakes up in silence to prepare the spirit. He reflects in silence before acting. He gathers in silence after a failure, not to punish himself, but to understand. And when he speaks, he does it not for vanity, but for intention. Because he who has learned to be with his own silence chooses better the words he releases in the world. Silence is also an answer, perhaps the most powerful of all. He does not need to win discussions. He does not seek to convince. He reveals. He shows where maturity is and where there is still noise. He who silences with wisdom does not omit. He positions himself with presence. And in this process, something extraordinary happens. The mind slows down. The heart stops chasing after approval. And you begin to inhabit a space where you don't have to prove yourself all the time. A space of consciousness, of alignment, of clarity. The silence reveals what the noise hides, the real intentions behind the actions, the emotions we try to ignore, the words that need not be said, the battles that are not worth fighting. It offers you a mirror more honest than any opinion. And when you look at it with humility, you begin to realize that much of what you considered urgent was just noise. Seneca said that a man who is able to be silent with himself will never be alone, because that silence is not loneliness, it is foundation. In him you learn to listen, and when you hear it, you begin to understand. And when you understand it, you start to lead with more wisdom. But attention, silence only becomes practical when it connects with action. It is not enough to remain silent and continue acting on impulse. True silence precedes conscious choice. It is the interval where you breathe, observe, understand, and then decide. Practice is in this interval. Start small, 5 minutes a day, without distractions. A coffee without cell phone, a walk without headphones, a moment before answering an email. Silence lives in these simple gestures, and from them is born a kind of force that the world does not understand, but that you will feel. Life is noisy, but you don't have to be. Turn silence into practice, and discover the power of those who act without noise, but with depth. Number 9, develop perseverance, not motivation. There are days when everything seems to flow. You wake up inspired, feel productive, the ideas come easily. And then, without warning, come the other days, those in which getting up from bed is a battle, in which every task seems to weigh triple, in which the mood disappears and the world loses its brightness. It is in those days that Stoic philosophy reveals its true value. The motivation is volatile. It depends on the mood, the climate, the results. It's like a fragile flame that the wind takes with ease. But perseverance, that's solid. It doesn't depend on feeling the will. It's moved by decision. It goes on and on. The Stoic does not act because it feels like it. It acts because it is the right thing to do. He understands that the great deeds of life are not born of fleeting enthusiasm, but of discipline, cultivated even in tiredness. Because greatness is not in the easy days, but in constancy. How many times have you started something filled with enthusiasm and abandoned as soon as the emotion passed? Motivation pushed you, but the lack of it brought you down. This is common, because we were trained to act only when we felt like it, and not when we decided to be faithful to a purpose. Perseverance is the muscle of the soul. And like any muscle, it needs to be trained in small gestures, in routine, in discomfort. It is when you do what needs to be done, even without spirit, even without recognition, even without immediate result. Seneca said that The greatest test of courage is to endure defeats without losing heart. And that does not mean not to feel pain. It means not to let pain dictate your way. Persevering is to walk with tears in your eyes, but with firm feet. It is to know that, even without guarantees, every step taken with integrity builds something inside that no apparent victory can offer. Motivation may even start the movement, but it is perseverance that sustains it, and that support comes from clarity on purpose. When you know why you do what you do, bad days cease to be excuses. They become part of the process. To practice perseverance is to keep the commitment even when enthusiasm fails. It is to wake up early when you wanted to sleep more. It is to study when tiredness dominates. It is to take care of yourself when the mind screams for flight. It is not rigidity, but fidelity. With you, with your way, with the values you have chosen to honor, and more. Perseverance builds self-respect. Every time you fulfill a little promise to yourself, something inside you becomes stronger. And in time, that respect is worth more than any external praise, because you start trusting yourself, even in the storms. The world celebrates who begins, but Stoicism celebrates who continues, because it is in continuity that character forms, and character is what sustains the soul when everything falls apart. So don't expect to feel like it. Hope to be clear. Don't look for euphoria. Look for solidity. Don't chase for motivation. Cultivate endurance. The flame of motivation goes out. The strength of perseverance kindles from within. Number 10. Choose your battles wisely. Not every provocation deserves an answer. Not every discussion is worth its energy. Not every injustice needs its confrontation. There's a deep maturity in realizing that reacting to everything is the fastest way to get lost in anything. And the Stoic knows this. He does not avoid the struggle, but chooses wisely where and when to fight. Have you ever seen yourself exhausted by small conflicts? By conversations that lead nowhere? By trying to prove something to whom you have already decided not to listen? It is easy to engage in battles that feed the ego, but impoverish the soul. And that is where Stoicism calls you for a break, for a reflection, for a choice. Every time you engage in something, you invest time, energy, peace. But you don't have infinite resources. So you need to learn to discern. Does it elevate me, or just wear me out? Does this fight bring me closer to my values, or just bind me to old standards? Choosing your battles is not cowardice. It is emotional strategy. It is knowing that dignity is not proven by shouting, but by attitudes. It is recognizing that one does not win by arguing with those who only want to win, but withdraws in silence with those who do not want to understand. And that silence sometimes is the noblest answer. Seneca reminds us that the insult does not hurt if you do not stoop to retaliate. The real strength is to maintain integrity when everything invites you to reaction. It is to preserve calm when waiting for your explosion. It is to save your energy for the battles that really matter, those that shape your character, not just inflate pride. The world is full of distractions disguised as urgent causes. And if you do not watch, begin to fight in the name of vanity, self-protection, need for control. But the Stoic does not waste his peace with battles of occasion. He asks himself, does this fight transform me, or only tire me? There are internal battles that deserve priority. To tame impulses, to overcome procrastination, to stay focused, to act with kindness even in anger. These are worthy struggles, because every inner victory reflects on everything you touch on the outside. But when you are too involved with the outside, arguing, justifying, reacting, you lose the connection with what really matters. The construction of a more stable, calmer, more lucid self. And this construction requires silence, demands retreat, demands intention. Choosing your battles is also choosing your destiny, because every conflict you buy shapes who you become. And if you spend your life fighting for everything, ends up fighting for nothing, or worse, becomes exactly what you once swore you wouldn't be. Then, stop. Observe. Discerna. Some battles are invitations to the ego. Others are invitations to evolution. And between one and the other, the difference is their degree of consciousness. You can lose the argument and win the peace. You can give up the last word and maintain your dignity. You can refuse war and come out stronger. Because your energy is sacred, and knowing where to deposit it is one of the purest forms of wisdom. Number 11. Nothing is yours forever. Not even pain. Nothing lasts. Neither pain, nor joy, nor life itself. Still, we live as if now is eternal, as if the situations that hurt us were forever, and the moments of happiness were guaranteed. We cling to what is changeable and suffer because we forget everything that exists is in motion. Everything without exception will pass away. This memory may hurt, but it is also liberating. Because by accepting the transitoriness of things, you fail to resist the flow of existence. Learn to taste what is good without the illusion of possession. Learn to endure what is difficult without the despair of eternity. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Time is like a river made of flowing events. Barely you see anything, and it has already been taken away, and something else comes in its place." This image of the river is powerful. All you live now is slipping, both pleasure and trouble. Your task is not to try to freeze the instant, but to plunge it with presence and detachment. When you forget that everything is temporary, you hold fast to what you should just touch. You try to hold on to people who no longer belong in your path. You suffer from losses as if they were the end, when they are really just transformations. You want immediate answers to pains that need time to teach. But when you remember impermanence, something changes. Anger comes to be seen more lightly. Fear dissolves in perspective. Anxiety loses strength. Because you understand that this moment, whatever it is, will end. And that brings a strange peace. A peace that does not depend on control, but on surrender. You start to appreciate what you have while you have it. You start looking in the eyes with more presence, listening more carefully, playing with more truth, because you know that maybe there is no later. Maybe that hug is the last one. Maybe that chance doesn't come back. And instead of paralyzing you, it wakes you up. The awareness of transitoriness is not an invitation to despair. It is an invitation to depth, to intensity without attachment, to presence without illusion. It is living every moment as if it were unique, because it is. And in doing so, you become whole. Not because you dominate time, but because you dance with it. Everything that afflicts you today, one day will just be a reminder. Every loss, however devastating it may seem, will be a scar. Every achievement, however glorious, will be overcome or forgotten. And it does not diminish its value. It just reminds you not to define itself by them. Impermanence is the only certainty, and one who embraces it ceases to live in denial, learns to flow, to let go, to start over, because he understands that nothing is guaranteed, nor what he loves, nor what he fears, and that consciousness makes you lighter, more grateful, more awake. Today, you may be living in chaos, but it will pass. Tomorrow, you may celebrate a victory. It will also pass. The question is, how do you go through all this? With despair or wisdom? With resistance or with acceptance? With attachment or with presence? Remember, everything that begins ends, but what you learn, what you become, that remains. And that does matter. Number 12, observe yourself every day without condemning yourself. Have you ever noticed how cruel the way you talk to yourself is? How do you judge your mistakes with severity, as if you are not entitled to fail? How do you internally repeat phrases that you would never tell someone you love? That hard, impatient, overly demanding look, far from generating growth, often paralyses. The Stoic does not seek perfection. It seeks progress. And progress begins with a difficult but essential step: to look inside with honesty and without condemnation. Because no one changes what he does not accept to see, and no one sustains lasting change moved only by guilt. Watching yourself without judgment is an act of courage. It is like lighting a light in a room long closed. You will see dust. You will see mess. You will see old marks. But you will also see space. Space to reorganize, to clean, to start over. What paralyzes is not error. It is the look you have on it. When you think about yourself all the time, you walk away from yourself. It creates shame, resistance, self-sabotage. It begins to hide your faults even from yourself. But when you learn to observe yourself with kindness and firmness at the same time, you begin to build a deeper bond with yourself, a bond that allows real transformation. This is not permissive. It is not to cover your eyes for what needs to be corrected. It is, in fact, the opposite. It is to look forward. With sincerity, with presence, with responsibility, but without the hardness of the wounded ego, without the charge of the unattainable ideal. Epictet said, "No one is free if he is not master of himself." And to be master of himself, one must know oneself in every layer. Recognize impulses, patterns, wounds, always. Admit where one stumbles, where one repeats, where one still lacks maturity. And from there, act. One step at a time. A more lucid choice. A thought more aligned with who you want to become. Evolution does not happen in shouting. It happens in the silence of small observations. The moment you realize that you reacted with impatience and decide to breathe. The moment you notice that you are sabotaging and choose to continue. The second you recognize that you are afraid, but still you move on. That kind of constant, intimate, honest attention is what it transforms. Not a big turn, but the accumulation of small agreements with yourself. Because you don't evolve if you hate yourself. You evolve when you commit to your own truth. And that commitment requires vigilance, a sharp but not cruel internal look, because what you see in yourself with compassion is more likely to be healed, and what you reject tends to repeat itself. To observe oneself is to leave the autopilot. It is to stop being a slave to one's own habits. It is to exchange the "I am like that" for "I am learning to be different." And this learning is daily. It never ends. But in time, it becomes lighter, more conscious, more true. So before you charge yourself so much, ask yourself, am I watching myself or just punishing myself? Looking at yourself wisely is the beginning of freedom, and true freedom begins within. Number 13, cultivate inner strength in the simplest routines. There is an illusion that many carry. That strength is only revealed in the great challenges, as if courage was reserved for tragedies, and discipline to decisions of high impact. But the truth is another and more demanding. True strength is not born in chaos but in repetition. It is not forged in noise, but in the silence of its ordinary days. The Stoic does not wait for life to crumble to train the mind. He understands that the soul is strengthened in the simplest routines, in the daily choices that no one sees, in the way you wake up, in what you think before you get out of bed, in the way you organize your thoughts throughout the day. The inner strength, the one that sustains character, is cultivated in the ordinary, because that is where the true self reveals itself. You get up early because you know that discipline begins before the sun. You eat what you need, because you understand that temperance is more powerful than momentary pleasure. You speak less and hear more, because you have learned that silence teaches. It is not heroic actions, it is consistent habits with who you have decided to be. And that's where the difference lives. While many await the motivation to act, the Stoic has begun. While the world celebrates great victories, it honors small fidelities. And when chaos arrives, and it arrives for all, it is already prepared, because the invisible training of the simple days made it unshakable. Seneca said, "If you want your soul to be strong, it must be tested." But this test is not always a crisis. Sometimes it is boredom. Sometimes it is constancy. Sometimes it is resisting the temptation to abandon a practice because no one will even notice. But you notice, and that's enough. Each daily choice is a seed. You can cultivate slouch or integrity. You can drag yourself in the morning or firm your foot with intent. You can give in to the impulse or remember who you want to be. It is in these moments that your philosophy ceases to be a concept and becomes flesh, gesture, action. What seems small, how to make the bed, eat carefully, take a deep breath before speaking, is actually the basis of your internal architecture. And when that base is solid, no storm knocks you down at all. The Stoic force is born there. When you say yes to what strengthens and no to what weakens you, even when you are alone, even when no one applauds, even when everything seems too repetitive to matter. But it matters, because everything that is done with a molded presence character. You can build temples of power within your routine. You can make the morning a rite of alignment, from work an exercise of focus, from rest an act of respect for you. And this commitment to the simple, to the invisible, to the constant, transforms. Do not expect great challenges to become strong. Become strong now, in the small choices, in the repetitions that no one celebrates. And one day, when life really tests you, you will realize that you are firm, not by chance, but because you have prepared yourself in silence. True force doesn't show itself. If it lives, and it starts in the first gesture of the day. Number 14, don't expect to lose to value. Time has a silent way of teaching us. It takes people, opportunities, forces, phases, and only then, in the echo of absence, do we realize what we had. It is almost cruel. When the table is full, no one notices the simple dish. When the body works well, no one appreciates the firm step. When someone is always there, the presence dissolves in everyday life, until one day, everything changes. And what seemed banal proves sacred, too late. This is one of the great mistakes of the mind, to postpone gratitude. We live as if everything were guaranteed, as if the days were infinite, the eternal bonds, the unshakable affections. But nothing is. And the sooner you accept that truth, the more deeply you can live. The Stoic knows that loss is no exception. It is a rule. Everything that is given can be taken away. Everything that seems right today, tomorrow can disappear. And there is no control over it. But there is a choice. To be whole while there is. To not wait for the departure to appreciate the presence. Have you ever regretted not having said something you felt? Have you ever blamed yourself for not paying enough attention? Have you ever wished to go back to act with more affection, more care, more time? These pains are common, because our conscience awakens with absence. But the Stoic trains your mind to awaken before. He cultivates presence as a remedy against future repentance. Marcus Aurelius said, "You may not live until dawn, so act now as if it were your last chance." That phrase is not a gloomy sentence. It is an invitation to lucidity. Because the truth is that every person you love is here to time indefinite. Every day with health is a rare gift. Every conversation can be the last. And when you face it with maturity, superficiality disappears. You start listening more carefully, playing more intently, thanking me for the hot coffee, for the complicit look, for the complicit look, for the comfortable silence. Every little gesture becomes a celebration, and that doesn't require great speeches, just presence, just commitment to being in fact where you are. Do not expect to lose to realize how much that routine was a blessing. Do not expect the distance to recognize the importance of a bond. Do not expect the end to wish you had done different. Emotional maturity begins when you decide to value it in the middle, in the now, in the apparently common. Because, deep down, you know, life is made of endings. And when they arrive, what remains is the memory of how much you were present, how much you loved without reservation, how much you cared for without waiting for a reason, how much you recognized the value of things before time took them. Seneca said, "You act as if you are destined to live forever, but time passes." And he does. Without warning, no pause, no return. So the urgency of being here with truth, to value what you have today, is an exercise of humility. It is to accept that nothing is yours, everything is loan. And the noblest way to honor this loan is to treat it with reverence, gently, with gratitude. Embrace more slowly. Look deeper. Tell me what you feel. Listen with your heart. Make every day an altar, because one day all this will be a memory. Let it be then, a memory without regret. Number 15, become your own guide. In a world where everyone seems to know what is best for you, where advice abounds and certainties are sold as absolute truths, there is a silent and transformative wisdom in turning inside. Not to isolate yourself, but to listen. Not to close down, but to find yourself. Because there comes a time when, if you want to live with authenticity, you need to learn to be your own guide. How many times have you acted driven by other people's expectations? How many choices have you made to please, to fit in, to avoid confrontation? And yet you felt empty, because no matter how much the world applauds, if you disagree with yourself, no applause is enough. Stoicism teaches that the source of direction is in you, that the highest criterion for your actions should be your conscience, not external approval, that the true master is the one who listens with honesty and corrects himself with courage. To become your own guide is not to reject the world. It is to filter the world. It is to listen to advice, but not to sell for them. It is to recognize that there are paths already taken, but to remember that yours is unique, that no one knows its shadows like you, and no one can inhabit its light in its place. Epictetus said, "No man is free if he is not master of himself." And being master of himself begins with the habit of consulting himself before deciding. To silence the external noise to hear the truth that pulses within. To ask, does this approach me to who I want to be? Am I choosing out of conviction or out of fear? Does it expand me or cancel me? You'll miss. You'll hesitate. You'll get confused. But in time, if you're faithful to this process, your inner voice will gain sharpness. It will become a compass. And in the face of doubt, you'll know, I can trust myself. Being your own guide also means being responsible. Stop outsourcing guilt. Stop waiting for rescues, assuming that even in the face of unforeseen events, you have a choice, and that each choice builds a step, up or down. Yes, because it requires vigilance. It requires self-analysis. It takes courage to counter what is expected of you. But it is this difficulty that makes the path valuable, and in the end, it is this path that makes you whole. You don't need to know everything. You just need to decide that you're not going to live on the autopilot anymore, that you're going to hear your intuition, that you're going to align your actions to your principles, that you're going to walk, even if you're afraid, because you trust what you're building inside. To be your own guide is not to be perfect. It is to be true. It is to have the humility to learn from others, but the firmness to not abandon yourself in the process. It is to fall and rise saying, I've chosen, and I can choose again. In the silence of his conscience lies his north. In fidelity to his value lies his freedom. And in the constant practice of listening, adjusting, and following lies his evolution. I sincerely hope that this message has been helpful. I sincerely want to congratulate you for coming this far and completing the video. That means that you want to improve as a person. If you liked the video, leave your comment. If you don't know what to say, comment gratitude. Then I'll know that you've watched until the end. If you're not already on the channel, what are you waiting for? Sign up now and join us. Stoicism is full of teachings like this, which are applicable to our everyday life. Therefore, I encourage you to continue learning about this philosophy. I leave here 2 videos full of Stoic wisdom, so you can continue learning. Until next,